I survived by having people I respected telling me the truth. Initially it was like, forget it, I'll make the show. I don't want to be on the shows. The whole world is auditioning right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want to say to people, be careful what you wish for. What don't you know about me? I'm shy. I'm not the person I was 10 years ago. The worst thing would be to be afraid of trying something new because it doesn't work.
So how are you finding fatherhood in general?
I love it, I've got to be honest with you. I mean, the most difficult thing for me initially was my hours, because I was a complete night owl. So I would work till like 6, sometimes 8 in the morning, and then I wouldn't get up till 2 or 3 in the afternoon. And that was my routine for years and years and years. And I think it was when he was about 2, when he finally said, what are you doing in bed at like 2 in the afternoon? I'm like, well, how do you explain these are my hours? And
He literally came up to you as a 2-year-old and was
like, what are you doing? And I'm like, well, I was working last night, didn't understand a word I was saying, and I thought, okay, I've got to switch everything around, and that was tough. I was so used to doing, what I called the night shift, and I actually loved it. I just thought that was when I was being really creative, and the idea of going out in the morning was like, how can anybody enjoy that? I genuinely felt like that for years. So when I switched and realized what morning light is compared to afternoon light, it's just brilliant.
Yeah, I bet, because it's, I mean, like I've worked night shifts in the past, and I think you can do it for a sustained period of time, but it is, I don't know, when I look back on that now, I think the time that I spent awake was sort of existing more than living.
Yeah, you think you're king of the world and everything's fantastic and blah, 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 but actually, no. We're not designed, I don't think, to work at night.
Well, also, I guess it makes a lot of sense to me, like you saying that, because kids don't understand, like, they have no, if you're tired or whatever, they're like, well, we don't care, we still want to go to the playground.
100%. No, totally. That was my biggest thing, which was, how the hell do I keep up with his energy? Because, from the second they wake up, just before they go to bed, they're on it. They're never tired, ever.
No, it's true.
It's
even without the Haribo.
Yeah, just all the time running around, blah, 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 blah. So I'm sort of desperately trying to keep up with him, and I'm just about managing. However, what I love is seeing everything through his eyes. Everything's different. You don't overthink everything. And when I note my shows, sometimes he's sitting and I watch him and he's just not interested. And I think, right, that's not in the show. And then he's fixated on something and I'm like, that's definitely in the show. But honestly, he's like the best barometer.
Do you think it's changed you kind of personality-wise?
This whole thing about bullying, that's the number one thing. Practically every kid who ever auditions on our show, if you ask the question, 99% of them have been bullied at some point. And the idea of him being bullied, I couldn't deal with that.
Do you think you're a bit more sensitive in that way?
Yeah, 100%. With your kids, you just want them to be happy. And because I hated school so much, I mean, it's like when he says to me, Dad, I don't want to go to school today, I'm thinking, yeah, nor did I. But I've got to sort of convince him that it's great, but I'm sort of managing that now, I think.
I was listening to some of the interviews you've done before talking about your school days, and it sounded like you were talking about how you were bored and not really interested, whatever, and it's so easy to just be like, this could have gone so differently. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like, why do you think it was that it didn't?
Well, I think I realised that I wasn't I was kind of like smart in a way, but I wasn't academic at all. And I had a really low boredom threshold. So Sunday night, 7 o'clock, I would get this pit in my stomach, which is, it's Sunday night, I've got to go to school tomorrow, so what illness can I fake tomorrow? I would try... Oh, yeah, I mean, I'd do that. The tea on my head, wet hands, whatever, I would try everything. And I just realised I was never, ever going to adapt to it. I just couldn't bear it. I mean, once I was in the school, I had fun, because I had friends, but we were all the same. It was like we were just really naughty, trying to get out of school, and I went from school to school to school to school to school, eventually boarding school, and then at 16 I was just out. Yeah, done.
So obviously you're much more present now, which is great. Like before you kind of made that shift from the night owl to being there, what, like your work-life balance percentage, work what, family what?
Well, I mean, before Eric, it was like 99% work. I mean, that was it. I mean, I was just obsessed with everything. And it was interesting because I was talking to someone earlier on about something, about a show. And they said, what would you do differently today? And I said, I wouldn't be obsessed with the ratings so much anymore. I think I got to that point where everything was all about, if you're not rating this overnight, you're a failure, or this or that. And I actually stopped enjoying what I was doing because you become so uptight with all of that. And you actually forget why you've made the shows, for instance, in the first place, which is, well, there's actually a reason for them. There is hopefully a purpose. And actually, it's a really fun job. If you get caught up with everything else, you're going to be miserable the whole time.
What did that actually look like? So would it be like, waking up at, well, it'd be a different time for you, but waking up first thing and being like what did that obsession look like?
I was just obsessed about beating the competition in any form whatsoever. I mean, to a ridiculous level, if I'm being honest with you. If your record didn't go to #1, or if you didn't beat such and such a show, it was like, I would get really down about this stuff. I mean, to the point I almost like depressed. And I didn't. It took me a long time to realise why I was unhappy, because it was like, look, there's always going to be someone who's more popular than you, and equally other people who may not be as popular as you. And you've kind of got to just manage that somehow, which is just do your best. And as long as you do your best, there's nothing much else you can do. It's when you're trying to kind of follow the ratings, and I think that's what happened with X Factor. It was almost like we were trying to chase the numbers by adding new elements to the show in the hope that might bring in another audience, and then you change something else, then something else. The next thing is you've kind of got like this sort of Frankenstein monster you've created, which is, how did it get from there to there?
And
why is no one having a good time? I was talking specifically about X Factor, and if I was to bring it back again, I would say, look, the only really thing that matters, you've got to find great people, with personality and talent, and then do your best. And whatever happens at the end, you almost want to let them free, which is like, I've done whatever I can do, now you take what I've given you and do your best.
Hand on heart, do you wish you'd rested it sooner?
I could have done. I think by the time, I remember that year specifically, we were paying crazy money, for people to appear on the show. And like I said, it was very much an ego-driven thing. We've got to be better than everybody else, and blah, 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 blah. And you're uptight the whole time. And I didn't enjoy it. So to answer your question, probably. But, it happens. And sometimes you just got to go, it's either time to say full stop or pause, bring it back, but go back to its roots, which is, these shows originated because from running a record label, I just knew how many people were trying to get record deals. The reality is, I know how many artists can be signed in any one year. I know how much money is given to each artist each year. And actually, in the real world, the successful artists are the artists who make the right decisions. Like, we don't have magic wands. You can guide someone, but it really comes down to that. And I think with X Factor, again, it was like, well, have we beaten Strictly? Are you going to have the Christmas #1? And it's like, my God, it never ends. you know, and I don't think it should have been like that. I think everyone got too uptight about it.
Yeah.
And it just should have been fun.
So is it going to come back?
Well, yes. I think if it was going to come back, it has to be. I would take it right back to its origins, which is great people, great auditions, and that really cool part of the show where you get to duet with a superstar. I think that more than anything else. Forget giving someone a record deal. Well, yeah, and also that moment lives forever, like Alexander and Beyonce. It's like you just can't buy that, you know, and the fact that audition clip will live online forever, I mean, that's amazing. Something like that, or when Rihanna duetted, George Michael, Elton John, I mean, that to me is what made the show special.
Is there anything else you do differently with it? Because I think we're obviously, in terms of reality TV, we're in quite a different place now.
Well, it's a good question. I think, importantly, find people who really want the artists to do well. You know, when we first started, it was 2 managers and me. So we were all kind of behind the scenes people, and all these shows over time kind of morphed into artists judging artists, which I don't think is the best idea, personally.
Okay, so if you were to bring it back, you'd have managers again?
Yeah, I think I probably would. I'd probably have managers, A&R guys, girls, whatever. People who've really managed or made people's careers successful. Because I think that's what the artists want. They don't really want to work with an artist. They want to work with an A&R
someone who knows what they're actually...
or manager, whatever, who can, like I said, guide them in the right direction. In the beginning, it was great because it was just fun. It was the fact that we were being paid to make these shows. It was like brilliant. And then, like I said, over time, everything started to get more serious and driven by these ratings battles, which in reality, it's like pathetic.
What did that look like behind the scenes in terms of, were there meetings being had where people are like, we're behind Strictly?
Yeah.
And how bad did that get?
Well, there was never sort of good news. It was like, you know, no matter what you did, it was like, well, Strictly beat you. And it's like, well, yeah, but that's just a bunch of famous people dancing. Who cares?
Did you punch any walls over it?
Well, I'm not kind of like a puncher, but I mean, I would, kind of tear my hair out and you know, back to my 4 in the morning, what are we going to do? And you come up with these mad ideas like the 6-chair challenge and blah, 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 which sort of sounded great. But then now I look back on it and it's like, that was just too much. You know, we didn't need to do that. I think personally with all these, you know, music-related ideas, it really does come down to the talent. You know, and they've kind of got to know themselves who they are. I like people who come on and say, I want to get a record deal, I couldn't get a record deal, but yeah, I mean, you know, X amount of hours on primetime TV, I'll make the most of it. That's kind of what you want.
Yeah. When you started these shows, it was very much, the persona was Mr. Nasty, no filter, says what everybody's thinking in most counts, but, you know, says it. How do you feel about that now?
Well, it was frustrating because so many people came in who just couldn't sing, or I didn't think were very good. Or, you know, alternatively, there would be people obviously cast who the producers thought were brilliant, who I didn't. Everything's subjective. On a personal level, when I you know, coming out the post room, 18, 19 years old, starting a record label, I think with £4,000, being broke by the age I was 30, literally broke, and then going back to live with my parents. You know, I survived not by people saying things I wanted to hear, but by having people I respected telling me the truth, which was, Simon, you've got this absolutely, completely and utterly wrong, and if you carry on like this, you're going to be broke, and you're going to be a laughingstock, and you'll have no hits. you've got to understand how to sign artists, make records, and understand what is a good song and a bad song. And it was very, very, very tough at the start. And I was like, they're all wrong, you know, they all hate me and blah, blah, blah. And then eventually it was like, they're right, I've got this completely and utterly wrong. And even when I started to have success, you know, I would play records in A&R meetings and, you know, other people would laugh at my records or, I mean, say a lot worse than I've ever said on TV. But it's like, well, it's a music business. If I decide that's what I want to do, that's what I'm going to do. You know, it's a hard business, this. So I could look back, I could probably soften some of the things I said. Having said that, I think it's worse to say to someone, oh, everything will be great.
Oh, yeah, I completely agree.
You know, it's just, I wouldn't have wanted that.
It's false hope then.
Yeah, it's false hope.
But I guess it's that middle, because now it's, I suppose, it's viewed differently, isn't it? When you're kind of, I think people are much more aware of the effect on people. And obviously you're talking about your own fears about bullying and things like that, like that's obviously somebody's child.
I mean, if I was putting Eric, which I don't think I would, on a show, I would say to him, you have really, really got to be good, and you've got to be aware of what comes with fame if this is what you want. So, you know, it's hard because, you know, we were saying this earlier on, the whole world is auditioning right now.
Yeah.
And sometimes you want to say to people, be careful what you wish for, because with fame or being well known, there is a bad side that comes with it, as well as the good parts that come with it. So you got to have tough skin.
What do you see as the darker side?
It's you are constantly being judged. People can say whatever they want about you today, and there's nothing you can say about it. Literally nothing. And you either decide to ignore it, or if you read it, it's going to wind you up. And that's why I don't want to go into too much detail regarding security and things like that, but trust me, it is a crazy world.
Is that something that's still quite a real worry for you?
For sure, yeah. Yeah, I mean, on a personal level, I mean, you know, I'm not the sort of person who would walk into a party with like 3 security people. I mean, it would be ridiculous. At the same time, with what I've had to, you know, experience myself, you know, people getting into my house and this and that, I mean, it's like you couldn't make this stuff up, literally.
What impact has that had on you? Because it is different with kids as well.
It is. I think, you know, it's interesting because a few years ago, I almost got to the point where I went, this isn't for me anymore. I just don't like what comes with being well known. But then it's like, it's too late. I made that decision.
When was that? When did that happen?
I think, you know, when Eric was very young, it was kind of like, God, I kind of brought him into my world. Is that a good thing? Maybe I should just stop doing what I'm doing. But then it was like, well, but I started this however many years ago, and it was my decision. And I was old enough, if I'm being honest with you, at that point to know, yes, with recognition comes everything else that comes with that. So like I said, you've got to have very, very, very thick skin.
Yeah.
And I don't have very thick skin.
No?
No, I could be very, ask Anne-Marie. I am super sensitive. I mean, seriously super sensitive.
What do you find the most hurtful?
I once stupidly read comments on
Oh,
a nice
don't,
article.
no.
I swear to God.
No,
And it
this
was
has
like,
happened to me and
Yeah.
I'm not famous.
And you know what? You know what's so annoying? I can still remember them today.
What did
And
they say?
I'm not even going to say it. It was just, I remember thinking, where are you when you wrote this thing and why did you say that? Because it was just unnecessary.
It's a funny thing, isn't it? Because you sort of, I don't know how these two things work together. People are much more sensitive to the impact on people now, but then there's also this sort of sense that certain people are fair game.
Yeah, yeah.
Which the two things are here and here, really. It doesn't make a lot of sense when you think
Look,
about it.
I get it. And the truth is that you can't be well known and then, complain about people writing articles. Because look, when I first started, as in the music business, I was phoning every newspaper, every radio station, every TV show, please write something about me or my records or whatever, because I needed it. And then when it, becomes something you haven't necessarily asked for, it's like, okay, well, you're right, it's fair game.
Just coming back to the security, is that something, has there been anything recently?
We got burgled, and I said to the security guy, well, what do I do? And he literally gave me a metal baseball bat. I said, what, I'm supposed to smash someone over the head with a baseball bat? He went, yes. And I did have one for a while. Look, again, it goes back to what we're talking about, which is I've experienced it. I still would do the same thing all over again, by the way. And I don't have any regrets about that. It's like, you make a decision. I was old enough, like I said at the time, when I was offered to do these shows. Initially, it was like, forget it. I'll make the shows. I don't want to be on the shows. And then when I did it for a year, I thought, it's actually fun. I quite like it.
Researching this interview, I think I read 35 pages of cuts to get to July or something like that. What do you think we don't know about you?
What don't you know about me? I'm shy. I was very shy as a kid. So I was very social as long as I was in my kind of house. So if my mum said to me, because I had a younger brother who was 18 months younger than me, you've been invited to a party, for me that was like going to school. I just couldn't deal with it. I was always miserable. So when I got into the music business and I used to have to go to things like the Brit Awards, again, my stomach would be in knots beforehand. And then going and then not getting anything was even worse. It was like torture. And then weirdly, by doing what I did, it kind of helped me on a social level, because it's almost like the ice is broken before you meet somebody, because if they know you or they've watched my show, you instantly have something to talk about. It's trying to meet someone for the first time at a party, standing up and making small talk is honestly my idea of hell.
You've mentioned, you mentioned earlier, feeling depression and anxiety there. Have you had therapy?
I thought about it. I probably will, if I'm being honest with you. I think, when I used to think about people going to therapy years ago, it was very kind of over the top and very dramatic, Now, because I know people who've gone through it, 100% I would do it, yeah.
Just to go back to X Factor, if you do bring that back, what does the timing of that look like?
Well, I'm guessing it wouldn't be next year, it would be 2024.
And with ITV?
I think it depends on...
Because there was talk of Channel 5, wasn't there?
Yeah, I think I would, again, using the party analogy, I always think, to go to a party, you've got to get a great invitation. If it says wear this, wear that, be there at 8 o'clock sharp, it's like you don't go. If it's like just turn up whenever you want to have a great time, it's going to be a good party. And I think the same thing with X Factor. It has to be, like when I first started working with ITV, in the initial stages, it was just brilliant. It was so much fun. When we went in with these ideas and we said, look, we want to make music shows and show auditions and this, they were like, do whatever you want. And there was no real talk then about ratings or the schedule or this. It was just, yeah, this sounds really great. We'd love to make it. Now, you have to go with the most enthusiastic person who also believes in what I think the show is all about, which is you've got to find, hopefully, some great people. If they're obsessed about strictly whatever, then we shouldn't make it with that person. Right. So I'm not answering your question. It has to be, in an ideal world, someone who phones you and says, I really want to make the show. I want to make it like it was when it first started. And we're not worried about how it does initially. We just want a young
To
audience.
be a bit more organic.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And the funny thing is that when I go out on my bike every day, here and in London,
Still?
and yeah, I do. I love it. That's my therapy, funny enough. But if I stop and have a coffee, and occasionally kids will come up, whatever, the first thing they always say is, when you bring about X Factor. And I'm like, well, how do you know about X Factor? We watch the clips online. So they do love the show. And I think, because when we stopped X Factor at the time, I was thinking with all the social media platforms, there's no need for these shows anymore, genuinely. I thought everyone's going to be signed from YouTube, whatever. But actually, you could argue, because there are so many people trying to get signed or noticed at the moment, that you do need this second platform. You know, that you need that moment. I always talk about moments. You know, whether it's an audition or a live show performance, that moment, Leona Lewis, when she sang Summertime, you know, that was a moment, and her life changed forever. And sometimes I think people, well, not actually, I really believe people need that. So I would go into this with, it's just about finding great people. And I don't think I would sign them to a record contract again. No. I think if somebody wanted to work with me, I would do it. If they didn't, you let them go.
So where's that gone south before?
Well, there are certain artists you think, I completely understand you and I know what to do, and other artists you don't. I mean, what people probably don't know about how X Factor worked is that all the artists were actually signed to Sony, not me. I just got a royalty lower than the artist, actually. So everybody thought I was making all the money. I didn't. I did all right.
You should have stuck to the deal, the first deal. What was it, where you didn't get paid but got the deal?
Well, exactly. Yeah, I've done some bad deals, by the way. But I think, you know, Got Talent in a way is a lot more fun, because once the show's over, it's like, do whatever you want. And if I can help you, like Susan Boyle as an example, of course I'll step in. If I can't, then you should go wherever you want.
And obviously I have to ask you about Stem Drop.
Yeah.
How has that been? How has that process been, setting it up?
Do you know what? It took a long time to set this up. Someone came to me with initially a television concept, which was, you know, at the heart of it, you know, a songwriter writing a song, you know, for everyone, basically. And I said, I think the idea is brilliant. I just wouldn't make this as a TV show. I would just go straight to TikTok. But to make it work, I felt we had to have the biggest songwriter to write the first song.
Yeah.
So I went to Max, and I've known Max a long time, and he has had more hits than anyone in the history of pop. And I said to him, look, we've got this idea. How would you feel about if you had a great song, instead of giving it to someone well known, what if you gave it to the world? And he went, that's a brilliant idea. And I said, yeah, exactly. Will you do it? And he said, give me 2 weeks to think about it, but I like the idea. So I waited for 2 weeks, and then I called him back, and he said, I love this idea, I'm going to do it. And that was it. And then I had to go to TikTok and everything else, and work with Universal. It took 2.5 years from the origins to the launch. But I think I've always believed songs are the most important part of any artist's career. You've got to have a hit song. And with so many people trying to get, you know, deals, attention at the moment, I think this could be a missing link, which is the opportunity to co-write with some of the most successful writers in the world as your first single. I think it's going to be massively helpful to a lot of people. I think 12 hours before the launch, I get an email, there's something wrong with the technology. I'm like, are you winding me up? No. And I said, well, then we've got to delay it. And then something happened 4 hours later, and the next thing I know is it's launched, and I thought, what happens if nothing happens? And then I started getting the figures through, and you know, how many millions of people, then it's turned into billions of people. So I think this is something which, importantly, the creative people on TikTok like this idea, and they've embraced this idea. Now, what happens next? I have no idea. Genuinely not a clue.
How does that sit with you?
I like it. And
Yeah.
funny enough, Max said the same thing to me, because once, you know, he'd committed, and Max is not someone, he really thinks about everything he does a lot. It's part of the reason why him and his team have been so successful. And he called me, he said, can I just talk to you about something? And I went, yeah. And he's in his kitchen and we're on Zoom. And he said, I tell you what I like about this idea, Simon. I said, what? I have no idea what's going to happen. I went, nor do I. And that was kind of the buzz, in a way. It reminded me when I first started, you know, working in the music business. It was like you have a hunch, but you're not quite sure what's going to happen next.
Do you think that alleviates the pressure? Because I can imagine when you've created a juggernaut like X Factor, like Got Talent, when you've presumably when you come in with a new idea, people are like,
oh, well,
and suddenly there's
no.
pressure.
You go to anyone today with a good idea, it's like, no. Simple as that, no. Everyone will say no. So you've got to persuade people over quite a long period of time that you are committed and you believe in this idea.
I'm surprised by that.
Oh yeah, you would. It's hard, you know, to get a big commitment from, you know, a platform like TikTok. They've really got to believe that you believe, and that's why I think it took so long. And then there was that moment when Max said, right, I've got the song, and I'm like, God, I'm really nervous. So I'm like, I put it on quiet, and I went, that's a great song. And then I put it on the second time, and I put the volume up, and I went, this is a fantastic song. And just that feeling of relief, it was just the best feeling. I have honestly no idea what's happening next, other than it should happen. I do believe people like Max and others should actually write something for like the world. I mean, logically, it kind of makes sense. Give one of your best songs to everyone rather than the obvious, or yourself. You know, why not give something to everybody?
It's a difficult thing, isn't it? Because in some ways you sort of, there's so many platforms now, which is a great thing, but I think it's that whole thing, isn't it, of how you cut through. But then, as you say, if it can happen organically and someone just, their head comes above the parapet, then you know they've really done it then, haven't you? So.
Well, I also think, you know, the way that we designed this, that you have basically all the tools to kind of make your own record. You know, everything that was sort of kept secret. This is what happens with record producers or record labels. It's like, well, no, this is how you do it. And do whatever you want with it. Just make a great version. And if your first single is co-written by Max Martin, I mean, that's cool. So, you know, if it goes well, I would do 4 or 5 of these a year. Yeah.
Is it tempting to sort of go more along this road than revisit X Factor, with X Factor being where it is?
Personally, yeah. Yeah, I would rather, if I was going to do something new, I would do it not on a traditional television platform now. I think, you know, just the way the world is at the moment, it's kind of, I kind of think it's a little bit crazy to box yourself into one country now. If you were going to do something, why wouldn't you do it where everyone can see it? And you can't do that with one broadcaster in one country.
Were you worried that getting immersed in something project like this, the work-life balance goes again?
You know what? I believed in this so strongly. I was just on the calls that I needed to be on. And if there was a hiccup, I was just available. I wasn't like obsessed working every day on it.
Yeah.
There was a huge team of people working on the idea, because you have to bring so many people together.
Yeah.
But it was that, just like with like Got Talent as an example, nobody wanted to buy the show. I mean, it was like dead in the water. And I kept thinking, I can't understand why nobody wants to make this. But maybe they were seeing something different to what I was seeing. And thank God we sold it eventually. And then it, it did really, really well. But I learned from that, if you believe in something, it's not going to happen like that. It does take a while. And then if it doesn't work, you die trying, But the worst thing would be to be afraid of trying something new because it doesn't work, because then you just give up.
Do you think about legacy a lot?
Yes, I do. Yeah, I do. Funny enough, I was actually thinking about a show we were going to make, and I think it was called It's Your Funeral. And basically...
Cheery.
Yeah, well, it's kind of like you only really know about somebody when they're dead. So it was kind of like a show where you're not dead, but what would your funeral service be like?
I mean...
It'd be brilliant, just see who would turn up and what would they actually say. It would be so funny. Because, in terms of legacy, people only really know what you've done when you're dead. But look, hopefully I'm going to be around a while. But I think I'm definitely being led down the path now of I do want to help people be successful. And it hasn't always got to be a format, and it doesn't always have to have rules and this and that and blah, blah, blah. It should be fun, like I was touching on earlier on. It should be something which, is big, but at the same time is relatively straightforward. And if, people can start a career off the back of that, that is a buzz. Those times when you audition people for the first time and you just have this feeling, I may have found a star. It is the best feeling in the world.
It does sound pretty addictive.
I swear to God it is. And there are days where I'm thinking, that's it, I'm never doing this again. I've had it, don't like anybody. And then out of the blue, somebody just turns up and you go, yeah, I love my job again.
That point that you mentioned earlier a couple of years ago where you were like, maybe I'm just done. What point was that? What triggered that?
Just being unhappy, I think. Just not, as I said, really enjoying anything because it just became stupidly competitive.
So what was kind of day-to-day life like at that point? What was going through your head?
Just not fun. If Eric hadn't come along, So
it's before he was born?
Yeah. Eric changed everything, I'm going to be honest with you. It was like, because once I lost my mum and my dad, you kind of think you're never going to feel that love again, which you had for your parents. It's like, that's it. And then, of course, well, now you have kids. I never thought I would feel that way. And it is beyond what you have for your parents. It's like, it almost hurts how much you love someone. At the same time, it's brilliant. And then, of course, you start thinking then about what's his dad done and all that kind of things. I think about that a lot.
How are you going, I interrupted you, how are you going to finish that sentence if Eric hadn't come along?
Well, God knows. I think, it's just kind of sad, the idea of me at my age still working at 4 a.m, obsessing about ratings. That would have been horrendous. The thought of it, I couldn't deal with that. It just would, because there's no win to that eventually. And what I have learned about the music business is it is one of the most selfish businesses in the world. Nobody helps anybody, is the truth. It just doesn't happen. So you've got to just be aware of that and understand that's the way it is. Don't feel sorry for yourself, but at the same time, if I can do something based on all my experience, and this idea is at the heart of what made me successful, was I managed to find hit songs. And because I had hit songs, I had hit records, and I had a career. I'm not the person I was 10 years ago, thank God.
Must be.
This would have been not a fun interview. I hate Strictly. I hate everyone. My show's gone down.
It does sound like quite a dark place.
You can make yourself very miserable. and you can get burnt out. At the heart of everything is not about the money, it's about the quality. You know, it just has to be good. I know that sounds very basic, but that's it. Whatever you do, just make it good, make it interesting, make it fun. Don't repeat what you've done before. If it ever feels like Groundhog Day, then it's time to move on.
So when you think about what Eric is going to think about what his dad's done, what do you want that to look like? On the show, it's your funeral. When Eric comes out,
I'll find out when I'm on my own show. I think Eric, thank God, likes what I do, and he does get it, and he's got a great eye. He loves music.
Is he on TikTok?
Yeah, but because I don't have a phone, he doesn't have a phone. So we, still, play football, we watch movies together, we go out. There's not really any video games or anything on social media we do together. I try and avoid that.
I think that's
and
good.
we still play Monopoly and things like that.
Who wins?
I cheat.
Do you have dad guilt about not being there as much at the beginning when he was there?
No, I think luckily, because it was about 2 when I did change, my kind of like working hours. I think, and actually during COVID, I didn't have a problem with that because I don't go out much. It's like, fine, I'm here with him. He's great company. Lauren, we get on great. It honestly wasn't a problem. And we really bonded during that period. I really enjoy his company. Sometimes Lauren says to me, can we ever go out without Eric? And I'm like, no. I just love going out with him, and we have drawing competitions, or we play games, when we go out. It's fun.
It's nice. It's nice to hear that you've got that close relationship, because I think it is, sometimes it's harder for dads.
Well, I was late to the party, so I was very worried at the time, thinking, God, how on earth am I going to keep up, with a 6-year-old, an 8-year-old, I'm really, really going to have to readjust here. And then weirdly, when I broke my back, as bad as it was something that was almost meant to happen, because I wasn't fit. I thought I was, but I wasn't. And I realized that because once I was starting to recover, I had to start walking, and I realized I hadn't really walked for about 20 years.
Hello.
Seriously, my feet were in bandages. I was really, really, really unfit. So, through the process, and that includes going back on my bike again, whatever, I'm more fit than I was before the accident. It was pretty bad when it happened, but I feel better now than I did before that.
You probably went through the mill a bit with it health-wise. I'm sure that stress wasn't good for you either. It kind of eats away at you after a while, doesn't it?
Well, it's a good point about stress. It's something we all deal with, or all live with. It's a question of how much you really know you're carrying. And stress will kill you, so you've got to get rid of it somehow. And it's easier said than done, but exercise, just all of that kind of stuff, it really does make a difference. There was a point in my life that everything was going great on the surface, but actually below that, it was just not fun and not great. And I think, what I was kind of judging myself on was just everything was skewed wrong.
At what point do you think it started to become much more negative with X Factor, as far as you were concerned?
Weirdly, at the point it got really successful, everybody suddenly went nuts, including me. It was like, what is the next change to the show we can do to do this, to do that? And it was like, it sort of grew into this like monster almost. Everything just got a bit skewed.
Yeah. It's hard to, I can understand the temptation to bring it back when people are asking about it, but on the other hand,
it's difficult. It's like having, you have a great party 10 years ago, and it's like, do you do it 10 years later? You know, or do you do something brand new? I don't know.
Do you still talk to a lot of the people that you did make successes?
No, not really. Well, I don't have a phone, so it's
Well,
kind of difficult for people to
unless
reach
they've got
me.
a pigeon
What?
to send you.
I mean, I hear from people. I mean,
Yeah.
Leona probably more than anybody else. You know, we've always been great friends. So I hear a lot from her. I bump into people all the time, of course.
Well, there's so many, aren't there?
There are, yeah. I mean, thank God.
And obviously, Stem Drop is going great guns, and we'll obviously see what happens with X Factor. What's in the future? What are the new ideas that are going to take 2 hours to come into 2 years to come into completion?
Well, I have something on my mind at the moment. I think, going back to what we were saying earlier on, is that genuinely, whatever I do next, it has to be fun. I think it has to be different. I do like this whole kind of mentoring thing, because with so many people trying to be successful at the moment, what can I do with everything I've learned over the years? Because I do get frustrated when people audition with these obvious songs. I'm like, why don't you come in with something I've never ever heard before? And it's like, well, like what? And I said, well, that's down to you. There's a lot of creativity in the world right now. There really, really is. And I think if I can do something to help people, then yeah, I would get a kick out of that. I think what I'm saying is just take away all these ideas of formats and rules and being in one country. That I think would be quite tedious.
I think it is. That's kind of in a summary a lot of what I thought about X Factor, to be honest, because I think that with any format that is around that long, it is almost impossible for it to not become the dragon that eats its own tail.
Yeah.
Because it's got to feel dated.
Yeah.
Eventually.
Yeah.
And what I sort of noticed, because obviously we did round tables and interviews over the years, you start to get all the jargon coming through from the people that have watched the show, and you could almost, we used to laugh about it, because you could almost, you could
like
write it without speaking to them.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think, once you allow television producers to start thinking they're A&R people, it's a big mistake. There's got to be somebody filtering everything, because the truth is, in any, day in any year, there are thousands of really talented people who, for whatever reason, just aren't making the right decisions. So if there's something where what we do will give them a leg up, then that's still the buzz. The days of like record labels, making these kind of grand decisions as to who's going to be successful, it's over. It's like the talent has taken over, thank God. So whatever
the masses decide.
Well,
the masses decide.
Exactly. So that's where we've all shifted to now. The problem is there's just too many people. So whatever we do next has got to be able to give somebody the noise and platform they need. I mean, that's really basically, I suppose, the pitch, isn't it?
Yeah. It's obviously already taken off.
Well, I think whatever I do next is, look, I don't want to be a television personality per se. I mean, the idea of, okay, well, X Factor's not on, so I'll be on a game show as a host. I mean, that would be, I think I'd jump off a cliff, literally.
Really?
I couldn't think of anything worse.
Why?
It's just depressing, the thought of that, just wanting to be on television because you want to be on TV. It's like, it's great being on TV if there's a purpose, for me. I love that,
So BGT aside, you're pretty much done? BGT, AGT?
On television, possibly, yes. Unless, like I said about X Factor, if there was an opportunity genuinely to make the show as it was intended again in the early stages, and I could guarantee the Beyoncés, the Rihannas, etc. at the end, then possibly, yeah. I loved being on Got Talent because it did actually make me laugh again. And that is a really important part. You've got to have fun when you're on these shows.
Yeah. I mean, saying that, like, I rewatched some of the X Factor auditions earlier today, and it is still great telly.
People love auditions. It's so interesting you say that, because I actually thought, when we made the shows initially, once they were over, they were over. And then, of course, YouTube comes along. And now, I think just about every country in the world, is watching these clips over and over again. I mean, more and more every year. And you kind of think, but that was 10 years ago, 15 years ago, but people still love them.
I was listening to your, I can't remember which interview it was now, one of them, and you sort of said you never wanted to be the famous person, you just wanted to be the person having the party. Is it kind of surreal how this has all turned out?
Well, look, again, I remember with Eric when he started to cotton on, Dad, why is it everyone laughs when they walk by you? And I know, they think I'm funny. Because a lot of people do that. They pass me, they just laugh for whatever reason. And then it came to, how come everybody knows your name? I'm like, well, Daddy does a job where, people watch you. He didn't get it. And then eventually, so I suppose, what?
What did he say?
I think it took him a long time to kind of work it out. It was like, there's a poster, you're on the poster. I was like, that's to promote the show I do. Yeah. And then once he was, I think, about 5 or 6, and he started to come down the show, then I think he kind of realized what my job was. But because, like I said, I don't really go to show business parties or stuff like that, he was really kind of kept away from all of that. It's only when we go out that he started to realize that people knew, that I was well known.
So if I was going to say how protective you are, you would say?
Out of 10, 11. I mean, crazy protective. Because I was so bad when I was his age. It's like, God, what if he does what I did? This is going to be a nightmare.
What specifically?
Burn the house down. Drinking at 8 years old, smoking when I was 8. I mean, I was terrible.
Burnt the house down, I'm going to come back to.
Well, I nearly did. I was showing my younger brother the Father Christmas outfit. Father Christmas wasn't real because the outfit was in the attic, and then I burnt his beard or something, dropped it on the sofa, and then the sofa caught fire. So my older brother, luckily, smelt the smoke or something, and by this point I think the room was on fire and the fire brigade around, blah 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 blah. It wasn't great. So all the time I'm thinking, just please don't be like me.
How was your dad as a dad?
He was cool, actually. My dad, he was he was very quiet compared to my mum. But he was wise, he would give me, occasionally he would say things to me for, the right reasons, which stuck in my head over time. But he never, I can't ever remember him ever raising his voice to me, ever. Well, that's a really good question. How would I prepare him? I would say, first of all, as we've discussed, you've got to have really, really, really thick skin. Number one. Number two, you've got to be prepared for whatever the peaks are. Because as we've discussed, getting there sometimes is more fun than being there. Yeah. And you've got to be prepared for that moment. You've reached a peak, so what happens next? You either go completely crazy, as I probably did for a couple of years, and then adjust, and you can hopefully end up where I am as we're talking today, which is, I am proud at what I've made and the careers I've launched. I don't worry about the ratings anymore because we're all in the same boat. We're all competing, whether it's newspapers, TV shows, we're competing with whatever's online. The world's drastically changed now, so.
But you would support him if he did want to do that with all that preparation?
Well, I would say to him, probably go my side of the desk, not that side of the desk. But I would say, if you really believe in yourself, then do it. However,
be ready.
Be prepared. Have good friends around you. Always have a little team. But look, I suppose it applies to anything. I mean, look, I was actually I was really, really, really not smart. And I wanted to do well. So I had no choice. It had to be something in entertainment. I thought I was probably going to be okay doing that. And that was my only choice. I wish I could have been maybe a doctor, but I just wasn't smart enough.
You never know.
Have
you been less bored in school?
For sure isn't going to happen.
Final question, what's more important now, family or work?
Family, 100%. However, I think, you know, when you talked about legacy, for sure, I mean, you want to believe that what you've done has been worth it, without sounding corny, but that is also important to me as well.
Do you not think it has already? Will it ever be enough?
No, there's always something next. You know, I do believe that. Not in a kind of a desperate way, but in a kind of like a much cooler, this would be good if we could do that. I suppose like we're talking about today, you know, with stem drop, you know, it's kind of like, it's been a buzz because it's new and it's the unknown again, and I love that.
Let's see. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. I feel healed.